The attack doesn't always announce itself with raised voices or clenched fists. More often, it arrives wearing the gentle mask of concern, wrapped in the familiar voice of someone who claims to love you. It's the mother who dismisses your dreams with a worried sigh, calling it protection. It's the friend whose jokes always seem to land on your most vulnerable spots, delivered with a smile that says, "Just kidding." It's the partner who questions every decision you make, framing their control as care. These relationships don't scream at you, don't leave visible bruises. Instead, they suffocate you slowly, so gradually that you mistake the tightening around your throat for a gentle embrace. The human body is remarkably intelligent. It registers every slight, every dismissal, every moment when your truth is twisted into something smaller and more convenient for others. While your mind scrambles to rationalize, to find excuses, to maintain the peace at any cost, your body keeps an honest ledger. It documents every microaggression. In the language of tension headaches, unexplained fatigue, that knot in your stomach that never quite goes away. And one day, when the accumulated weight becomes unbearable, your body screams what your voice has been forbidden to whisper. According to Dr. Gabor Mate, whose groundbreaking work When the Body Says No has opened our eyes to the devastating connection between emotional environment and physical health, the people around us wield more power over our well-being than we dare to acknowledge. It's not just about the obvious stressors, the dramatic conflicts or overt abuse. It's about the repetitive, almost invisible patterns of invalidation, manipulation, and emotional hostility that weave themselves into the fabric of our daily lives until we can no longer tell where we end and their expectations begin. The body doesn't distinguish between a physical assault and the constant atmosphere of emotional oppression. Both trigger the same stress responses, flood the system with the same harmful chemicals, create the same states of hypervigilance that eventually break down our immune systems, our sleep patterns, our very will to thrive. The difference is that we're taught to recognize and flee from physical danger, but emotional toxicity often disguises itself so well that we end up protecting our abusers and blaming ourselves for our own deterioration. Many people spend their entire lives surrounded by influences that systematically sabotage their physical and emotional health, yet they never recognize the source of their suffering. They learn to call normal what is slowly destroying them from the inside out. They adapt to environments where their feelings are consistently minimized, their boundaries are labeled as selfishness, and their authentic self is treated as an inconvenience to be managed rather than a person to be cherished. Here isn't about a single villain in your story. More often, it's an entire system of relationships, whether at work, within your family, or in your social circles, that reinforces the same toxic messages day after day. You're too sensitive, you're overreacting, other people have it worse, your pain isn't that serious, your dreams aren't realistic, your boundaries are unreasonable. These messages, delivered consistently by people whose opinion matters to you, don't just hurt your feelings, they restructure your entire relationship with reality, teaching you to doubt your own perceptions and dismiss your own needs. Mate's research reveals that emotional repression doesn't develop in a vacuum. It's an adaptation, a survival mechanism that emerges in response to environments that punish authenticity and reward compliance. When expressing your true feelings consistently leads to rejection, criticism, or abandonment, your psyche learns to prioritize connection over truth, peace over authenticity, others' comfort over your own well-being. What begins as a strategy to survive in toxic environments eventually becomes a pattern that destroys you from within. The cruelest irony is that this adaptation, which serves to protect you in the short term, becomes the very mechanism of your long-term destruction. By learning to suppress your emotions, ignore your needs, and minimize your pain, you don't eliminate these experiences. You simply drive them underground, where they ferment and eventually manifest as physical symptoms, relationship difficulties, and a profound disconnection from your own life. The first, and perhaps most insidious sign that the people around you are slowly destroying you is their consistent invalidation of your emotional reality. This rarely looks like someone telling you outright that your feelings don't matter. Instead, it appears in the form of well-meaning comments designed to minimize your experience and make you question your own perceptions. When you express hurt, frustration, or fear, you're met with responses like, "You're being too sensitive," "It wasn't that bad," or "You're overreacting." These seemingly innocuous phrases carry a devastating message. Your internal experience is wrong, your emotional responses are inappropriate, and your pain is an inconvenience to others. Over time, this constant invalidation teaches you to distrust your own feelings and second-guess your reactions to harmful situations. The psychological impact of this pattern cannot be overstated. When your emotions are repeatedly dismissed by people whose opinions matter to you, you begin to internalize their judgment. You start to believe that feeling deeply is a character flaw, that expressing vulnerability is weakness, and that your role in relationships is to manage others' comfort rather than honor your own truth. This emotional self-abandonment creates a chronic state of internal conflict, as your authentic feelings continue to arise even as you've learnt to suppress and shame them. The physical consequences of this emotional invalidation are profound and often delayed, which makes them particularly dangerous. Your body, unable to express and process emotions naturally, begins to hold this unexpressed energy in the form of muscle tension, digestive issues, headaches, and fatigue. The stress of constantly monitoring and censoring your emotional responses keeps your nervous system in a state of chronic activation, leading to inflammation, compromised immunity, and eventually serious illness. Perhaps most tragically, many of the people who invalidate your emotions do so with the sincere belief that they're helping you. The parent who tells their crying child to toughen up believes they're preparing them for a harsh world. The friend who dismisses your concerns about a relationship believes they're keeping you from being too dramatic. The partner who minimizes your work stress thinks they're helping you maintain perspective. But regardless of the intention, the impact remains the same. You learn that your emotional truth has no place in these relationships, and you begin the slow process of disconnecting from yourself. The second devastating pattern that signals toxic relationships is the one-way flow of emotional support. You become everyone's safe harbor, the person others turn to when life becomes overwhelming, but when you need shelter, you find only closed doors and uncomfortable silences. This dynamic is particularly insidious because it masquerades as proof of your strength and importance in others' lives, when in reality, it's a form of emotional exploitation that leaves you depleted and isolated. In these relationships, you're always available to listen, support, console, and solve problems. Your phone is the one that rings when someone needs to vent about their boss, process their relationship drama, or seek advice about major life decisions. You pride yourself on being reliable, on being the rock that others can depend on. But when you attempt to reciprocate, when you need someone to hold space for your struggles, you're met with distraction, deflection, or outright unavailability. This pattern creates a profound imbalance that extends far beyond simple unfairness. When you're consistently placed in the role of giver while being denied the opportunity to receive, you internalize the message that your needs are less important, your struggles less valid, your pain less worthy of attention. You begin to feel guilty for having problems, ashamed for needing support, and increasingly isolated, even when surrounded by people who claim to care about you. The physiological impact of this emotional exhaustion is severe and cumulative. The constant outflow of emotional energy without any corresponding nourishment creates a state of chronic depletion that manifests as persistent fatigue, insomnia, weakened immune function, and a pervasive sense of running on empty. Your nervous system, perpetually activated by others' crises while being denied its own needs for comfort and connection, eventually begins to break down under the strain. Paradoxically, this pattern is often reinforced by praise and social validation. You're labeled as strong, resilient, the person everyone can count on. These seemingly positive attributes become a prison, as they create an expectation that you'll continue to be endlessly available while never burdening others with your own needs. The very qualities that others celebrate in you become the chains that bind you to relationships that extract everything while giving nothing in return. The third sign of toxic relationships is control disguised as care. Perhaps the most difficult pattern to identify and confront because it's wrapped in the language of love and concern. Unlike overt control, which announces itself through demands and ultimatums, this subtle form of manipulation operates through suggestions, worried observations, and loving interference that gradually erodes your autonomy while making you feel ungrateful for resisting this control. Manifests in countless ways, each designed to make you question your own judgment while appearing to have your best interests at heart. It's the parent who responds to your career change with, I just want you to be secure, but this seems risky. It's the friend who greets news of your new relationship with, I hope you're being careful, remember what happened last time. It's the partner who expresses concern about your friendships, your hobbies, your ambitions, always framed as protection but functioning as subtle sabotage of your independence. The insidious nature of this control lies in its emotional sophistication. These manipulations are crafted to trigger your deepest fears and insecurities while positioning the controller as your protector. They plant seeds of doubt about your decisions, your capabilities, your worth, all while maintaining plausible deniability. When you confront this behavior, you're met with hurt confusion. I was just trying to help. I care about you. Why are you being so defensive? Living under this subtle control creates a constant state of second-guessing that is exhausting to maintain. You find yourself seeking permission for decisions that should be yours alone, anticipating others' reactions before taking action, and gradually shrinking your world to avoid triggering their concern. This hypervigilance taxes your nervous system, creating chronic anxiety, decision paralysis, and a persistent sense of walking on eggshells in your own life. The physical symptoms of this psychological imprisonment are unmistakable once you learn to recognize them. Chronic muscle tension from constantly bracing for criticism, digestive issues from the stress of perpetual performance, headaches from the mental gymnastics required to navigate their expectations, and a fatigue that rest cannot cure because it stems not from physical exertion, but from the exhaustion of living someone else's version of your life. The fourth sign that toxic relationships are destroying you reveals itself in the moments that should be your bright. You've worked hard, achieved something meaningful, overcome a significant challenge, and you're ready to share your joy with the people who matter most to you. But instead of celebration, you're met with silence, forced smiles, cutting remarks disguised as humor, or immediate deflection to someone else's problems. This is emotional sabotage, the systematic undermining of your achievements and growth, and it's one of the most soul-crushing patterns in toxic relationships. This sabotage rarely announces itself as jealousy or competition, though that's often what drives it. Instead, it appears as concerned questions about whether you can handle your new responsibilities, reminders of past failures at moments of current success, or subtle suggestions that your achievements are due to luck rather than effort. When you get promoted, they ask if you're sure you're ready for the pressure. If you're sure you're ready for the pressure. When you share exciting news, they immediately point out potential problems. When you take steps toward your dreams, they remind you of all the reasons it might not work out. The timing of these responses is particularly cruel because they strike at moments of vulnerability. Sharing your successes requires courage and trust. You're opening yourself up, expecting support and celebration, and instead you receive a bucket of cold water thrown on your enthusiasm. This creates a powerful psychological conditioning that associates achievement with isolation, success with punishment, and growth with the risk of losing connection to others. Mate's research shows that this type of emotional hostility to personal growth creates chronic stress patterns that are particularly damaging to the body. When your victories are consistently met with coldness or criticism, your nervous system begins to interpret success as dangerous. You develop anticipatory anxiety around achievements, your body rebels against opportunities for growth, and you may even begin to sabotage yourself before others get the chance to do it for you. The most insidious aspect of this pattern is how it's disguised and denied. When you confront someone about their lack of support or their undermining comments, they respond with phrases like, "I was just being realistic," "I didn't want you to get your hopes up," or "I was just joking." This gaslighting makes you question your own perceptions and internalize the blame for their behavior. You begin to wonder if you're being too sensitive, if you expect too much from others, if the problem is your need for validation rather than their inability to celebrate your growth. Over time, this conditioning shapes your relationship with success itself. You learn to minimize your achievements before others can do it for you. You stop sharing good news to avoid disappointment. You begin to associate standing out with danger, excellence with isolation, and personal growth with the threat of abandonment. This isn't just emotional damage. It's the systematic destruction of your ability to thrive and create the life you deserve. The fifth sign is perhaps the most subtle yet devastating: induced isolation. Unlike choosing solitude for reflection or rest, this isolation is imposed through a carefully orchestrated campaign of subtle manipulations designed to weaken your support network and increase your dependence on toxic relationships. It begins with seemingly innocent observations about your friends and gradually escalates into a pattern that leaves you emotionally cut off from anyone who might offer genuine support or perspective. This isolation starts with small comments that plant seeds of doubt about your relationships. Have you noticed that Sarah only calls when she needs something? I don't know what it is about Mike, but something feels off to me. Your family doesn't seem to really understand you the way I do. These observations, delivered by someone whose opinion you value, begin to contaminate your other relationships with suspicion and doubt. Over time, these comments accumulate into a narrative that positions the toxic person as your only true ally, while painting everyone else as unreliable, selfish, or potentially harmful. You begin to second-guess your other relationships, analyzing every interaction through the lens of suspicion that's been carefully cultivated. Gradually, you find yourself declining invitations, avoiding difficult conversations, and withdrawing from connections that once nourished you. The genius of this manipulation is that it makes you complicit in your own isolation. Rather than forbidding you from seeing others, which would be obviously controlling, the toxic person simply makes it uncomfortable to maintain other relationships. They create drama around social events, express hurt when you spend time with others, or manufacture crises that require your immediate attention whenever you try to connect with friends or family. The physiological impact of this enforced isolation is profound and well documented. Chronic loneliness affects the body in ways that are comparable to smoking or obesity. It weakens the immune system, increases inflammation, disrupts sleep patterns, and creates a state of chronic stress that accelerates aging and increases the risk of serious illness. Your body experiences isolation as a fundamental threat to survival because, from an evolutionary perspective, connection with others has always been essential for human survival. What makes this isolation particularly damaging is that it's often justified as protection. The toxic person positions themselves as shielding you from a world full of people who don't have your best interests at heart. They create an us against the world mentality that initially feels intimate and special, but ultimately becomes a prison where they are both your jailer and your only source of human connection. The sixth sign manifests as living in a constant state of judgment and competition, where every interaction feels like a test you might fail, and every achievement becomes ammunition for comparison. Whether at home, at work, or in social circles, you find yourself in environments where criticism is constant, but praise is conditional, where your worth is measured against others, and where the possibility of judgment hangs over every conversation like a sword waiting to fall. In families, this creates an atmosphere where siblings are pitted against each other, where parental approval must be earned through performance, and where love feels conditional on meeting impossible standards. At work, it manifests as colleagues who turn every task into a competition, supervisors who focus on flaws rather than strengths, and cultures where collaboration is impossible because everyone is too busy protecting themselves from criticism. This constant evaluation creates a state of hypervigilance that is exhausting to maintain. Your nervous system remains perpetually activated, scanning for threats, preparing for criticism, anticipating rejection. You begin to edit yourself before speaking, second-guess your decisions, and shape your behavior around others' expectations rather than your own values. The mental energy required to navigate these environments is enormous, leaving little resources for creativity, growth, or genuine connection. Living under constant judgment also distorts your relationship with yourself. When external validation is unpredictable and criticism is constant, you internalize these voices and become your own harshest critic. You develop perfectionist tendencies not from a healthy desire for excellence, but from a desperate need to avoid the pain of disapproval. This internal critic becomes more brutal than any external voice, creating a prison of self-doubt and self-attack that follows you even when you're alone. The physical symptoms of this chronic stress are unmistakable. Muscle tension that never fully releases, headaches that come without warning, digestive issues that flare up during stressful periods, and insomnia that leaves you exhausted but unable to rest. Your body is spending so much energy on threat detection and self-protection that basic functions like immune response, tissue repair, and hormone regulation begin to break down. The seventh and final sign is perhaps the most devastating because it strikes at the moment of your greatest vulnerability. After enduring months or years of invalidation, emotional depletion, control, sabotage, isolation, and judgment, you finally reach your breaking point. You gather the courage to speak your truth, to express your pain, to ask for the support you desperately need, and instead of receiving compassion or even acknowledgement, you're met with silence, deflection, or outright denial. This is emotional abandonment in your darkest hour, and it often becomes the catalyst for serious physical and psychological breakdown. This abandonment doesn't always look like someone walking away. More often, it appears as uncomfortable silence when you express pain, immediate subject changes when you try to share your struggles, jokes designed to lighten the mood when you need someone to sit with you in your darkness, or responses that somehow make your pain about their discomfort. When you finally lower your defenses and show your wounds, you discover that there's no one willing to witness your suffering, let alone help you heal. The message this sends is devastating. Your pain is inconvenient, your struggles are burdensome, your emotional needs are too much to handle. You learn that vulnerability is punished, that authentic expression of distress drives others away, and that your role in relationships is to manage others' comfort rather than seek comfort for yourself. This final betrayal often breaks something fundamental in the psyche, leading to a protective shutdown that can take years to heal. When this abandonment occurs, the body often responds with a complete system breakdown. The nervous system, already overtaxed from chronic stress, simply cannot handle this final assault on your sense of safety and connection. Physical symptoms that may have been manageable suddenly become overwhelming, chronic pain that doesn't respond to treatment, autoimmune conditions that flare without apparent cause, panic attacks that come from nowhere, or a profound fatigue that makes basic activities feel impossible. This is not weakness or drama, this is a human nervous system responding to inhumane treatment. The body's rebellion in these moments is not pathology but protection, a desperate attempt to force you to pay attention to what your mind has been trained to ignore. When emotional expression is consistently punished, the body takes over the job of communication, speaking in the language of symptoms that cannot be dismissed or minimized. The conclusion is both harsh and necessary. The people around you have more power over your health than any genetic predisposition, more influence over your well-being than most medical conditions, and more control over your future than you may want to acknowledge. If you recognize these patterns in your relationships, if your body has been trying to tell you something through persistent symptoms that don't respond to conventional treatment, if you feel like you're drowning while everyone around you insists the weather is fine, then it's time to listen to what your body has been trying to tell you. The choice before you is clear but not easy. Continue sacrificing your health and authenticity to maintain relationships that are slowly killing you, or begin the difficult but essential work of reclaiming your right to exist without apology, to feel without censorship, and to thrive without permission from others. Your body is keeping score, and the bill for staying in toxic relationships always comes due. The question is not whether you'll pay, but whether you'll choose to pay with your health or with the discomfort of necessary change. Recovery is possible, but it requires acknowledging that some people in your life may not be able to handle your healing. They may resist your boundaries, criticize your growth, or abandon you when you stop being who they need you to be. This is not a failure on your part. It's information about the true nature of these relationships. Your healing will threaten systems that depend on your sickness, and that's exactly why it's so necessary. The journey from emotional captivity to authentic freedom is not easy, but it's the only path that leads to genuine health, real relationships, and a life that's truly your own. Your body has been trying to save you. The question is whether you're ready to listen and brave enough to act on what it's been trying to tell you.